So you want to work at All American Burger. All right, a slightly different location today. What do hipsters do when it's 80 degrees and sunny outside? You go outside and you wear your knit hat because it makes absolutely no sense. In my case, I have a good excuse. I just got off my bike. I did my morning 20-mile loop and I have a bad case of helmet hair. My hair's bad to begin with, as you've seen, but when it comes out of a bike helmet after 20 miles, it is ungodly. It's unsightly. I'm not sure, I probably would lose any of the subscriptions I have, however many there are. They would probably go away. I've got an extra lens, my Sony 55-1.8, which is my David Attenborough look, which I'm gonna hold back in reserve until I've got something really good. This film came to me last night after another photographer came over to visit, and we were talking about Albania and teaching and doing all kinds of things. And for some reason, it got me thinking about a folder of images I had on my desktop, a folder of images that were made with the Hasselblad and an 80 and Tri-X, and they were documentary images. Square format is a very appealing thing for me. I've always loved shooting in square format, and I've used it successfully and I've used it unsuccessfully. And my goal here is to show a body of work that, in my mind, does not work. It is not a successful use of a 6:6 format for documentary work. But here's the wrinkle and why I think this might be interesting. The work actually worked commercially. My agent liked it, the agency liked it, they took images and they distributed that. They had a worldwide exclusive of my work that they then took those images and distributed them around the world, licensed them for commercial purposes. Kind of surprising, because I looked at the body of work and said, this doesn't work for me, it kind of fails. It's not the kind of work I like to do. It's not me, but they looked at it and said, oh, this is great, we can sell this. And that's another sort of weird wrinkle of being a professional photographer. For some people it works, and for other people it doesn't work at all. And for me, over time, the more this kind of thing happened, the less I wanted to be a professional photographer. I just wanted to do my own stuff in my own way. The 6:6 is a very, like I said, sorry, it's an intriguing, I think I swallowed a bug. It's an intriguing format, but I need to, like everything else in my long-winded, rambling, self-centered life, this demands a bit of a backstory. God, I hope this is focusing. It's so bright out here, I can't see anything. It's like I'm in a blizzard, a sun blizzard. And if it's not, I'm gonna be pissed because I'm trying to make 700 films in the next 24 hours. I studied photojournalism in particular. I did not study photography. Photography was in the art department, and that is what I should have studied. But I didn't even know that that major existed until I was 3 years into photojournalism, when I ran into a photography student who told me what life was like as a photography student, not a photojournalism student. And I was like, I'm a complete idiot. I didn't even know I should have taken that, because there were no rules. You could do whatever you want. Probably a lot of pot smoking too. Lots and lots of pot smoking. It's the art department. What else is going on in there? People looking at their feet. You know what I'm talking about. So I study photojournalism, tons and tons of rules, you know, got to do this, can't do this, ethical things, moral things, you know, which is great. I love journalism. I still love it to this day, even though I don't do it. I miss journalism. I do not miss the photojournalism industry in one degree. Not one iota of my body misses the industry, but the actual reality of journalism I love. But journalism, because on a daily basis you had no idea where you were going to be and what you were shooting, it was primarily a 35mm world, because you had to adapt quickly, fast. You might shoot a funeral, you might shoot a forest fire, all in the same day. So primarily 35. I went to school, Nikons were sort of the flavor of choice. I got out, I started shooting Canon 35, and with the zooms I mentioned in another film, that was sort of the newspaper journalism MO at the time, was Canon EOS 1s with a 20-35 7200. And I also had a Leica. And at the time I had a Leica and one lens. And in 1996, I went to Cambodia to do a project for a lawyer, an American lawyer who had established a law school in Phnom Penh. And the country at the time was very much in turmoil. It's kind of a tricky place to be. You had to really watch yourself. At one point in the middle of the night, I was running from a guy with an AK-47 through the middle of the city. That was interesting. The lobby of my hotel, there was a guy with another AK, and one night he like lit somebody up outside the hotel. I don't know if he hit anybody, but there was definitely a nice little burst of machine gun fire. I got to work with NGOs. I worked with people in the UN. I worked with Mary Knoll Sisters who were on a polio eradication campaign. It was very eye-opening and educational for me. I went into that project and I flew to Cambodia with 2 camera systems. I went with a Canon, which was, again, film cameras at the time, but the two EOS bodies, the 2 zooms, and that was sort of my workhorse camera gear because working for the lawyer, I didn't know what I was going to be involved in. Every day was different. I had to be reactionary. I needed a camera system that was very complete. I needed a good strobe system. I was constantly using the strobe, popping fill light in because the light was a lot like it is now. It was harsh, and man, Cambodia was smoking hot, unbelievably hot. But I also had a Leica with me. And I would get up early, and the first couple hours of the day and the last couple hours of the day, I would go out with the Leica by myself because that was really for me. That was the kind of work that I wanted to do. It was a small camera, unobtrusive, you know what I mean. So I come back from that trip, and shortly thereafter, I see work from Cambodia by a Magnum photographer named Paolo Pellegrin, who I actually know. And Paolo was working in Cambodia with a Hasselblad, or square format camera. I think it was a Blad. I also found the work of Claudio Ettinger, the Brazilian photographer, who was shooting with a Blad. I found Georgia Fiorio's work in Life magazine with a story called Through the Gates of Hell, which was a small project as part of a larger project she did on men, which is one of the singular best reportage projects I've ever seen. I also saw Lee Friedlander's work. I'd been seeing it forever with the square format. There were a handful of people that I saw working. Steve Lehman's book on Tibet was shot with a Mamiya 6 or Mamiya 7. I was assisting for someone who switched from using RZ67s into Mamiya 6s and 7s. I remember because I dropped one of his cameras one of the first days after he got it, which was not good. As an assistant, try not to drop the photographer's camera on the asphalt out of the car. That's step 1. Don't damage the camera equipment. So anyway, in the back of my head, I was like, I think I want to start shooting reportage with the square. Now, that in itself was not a bad decision. But the kind of work, remember, I studied photojournalism. This is reality-based imagery, no manipulation, fast, decisive moment, quick movements. I'm looking for pictures that exist in one frame moments and they're gone forever. And with the square, that is really difficult because it's slow. It's a very slow way of working. So I'm going to show you some pictures today. I'm going to show you 2 that you've seen before that are square format reportage that I think work really well. Then I'm going to show you a body of work that doesn't work well because even though the agency liked it, it was commercially successful, I just didn't resonate with me at all. And I think that's important. The other thing that happened starting about 15 years ago, when digital first, and I was playing with my tripod adapter. That's what that annoying noise. Hey, you want to hear the most annoying sound in the world? That's it right there. So I was, 15 years ago, digital takes over. And the Salgado types in the world, which are people who are dedicating 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 years to projects, start to go away. The new generation of photographer comes in and says, I don't have time to waste on these long-term projects. I've got to get relevant, successful, and famous right now. So documentary photography changed. And one of the things that I saw happening all over the world was that the reportage reality-based style work was fading away, and it was being replaced by portrait series. These are photographers going into the field and shooting portraits that would have typically been shot, that the stories would have been done through reportage and putting time in, where suddenly people were like, I don't want to take time to do that. I'll just go to the same location and then I'll spend 2 days and I'll bang out 20 or 30 portraits and then that'll be my project. I saw this at Perpignan, I saw this at Paris Photo, I saw it at festivals all over the world, this dynamic shift in what was reportage. Square format works amazing for that because the quality, the fall off on a 6.6, the quality of it, it's wonderful. It's just not the strongest work. So again, the mission of today's film, if there is such a thing, is to show images that are my style of photographs, reality-based, fleeting moments that were made with a 6.6, continuing in the tradition of the kind of photography that I make, and then me like losing my mind, falling prey, doing some other weird 6.6 project in Coney Island, as it may, and not liking it and saying, I don't think this works very well. But Other people liked it. So that's it. That was my point today. This lens is now like the temperature of the surface of the sun. I'm sure the camera's about to overheat. I have a nice little line, rivulets of sweat going down my back. Oddly enough, my head is not hot. It's not hot yet. I can't explain that. All right, you jackals, let's take a look at a couple of photographs that I think actually work. This one you've seen before. I've used this on Notes on Photography, and I will probably use it again in a myriad of other ways. This works. This is a reportage image. There is exactly one frame of this in existence, and that is it. I had to be ready. I had to be prepared. This is a journalistic style image, a documentary image, a reality-based image. And that is exactly what my kind of photograph is. It's my style, not what the industry is telling me to do. And yes, there is a sister image to accompany this first image. And this is the second image. If I was going to show a diptych from this day, this is exactly the image I would use. In fact, I have shown this as a diptych many times. This second picture was made moments after the first one. This is very telling. It's very representative of me as a photographer in terms of the framing and the cropping and the layering and all of the things that I've tried to do for my entire career. These first two photographs are representative of me. This is the kind of image that I'm after, and I think these are very successful. And oh, by the way, I probably have 8 or 10 other images from this day that you haven't seen that I think actually work pretty well. Okay, I couldn't stop myself, and it is my YouTube channel, so I can do whatever the heck I want to do, and you guys have to endure it. It's awesome. This is another image I made that day that I really like, but 35. For crap's sake, don't do what I do. Don't go in the field with multiple formats. That's what I did on this day. At this point in my career, I was doing this all the time. That's not the smartest thing in the world. So in addition to these two successful square images and the 6, 8, 10 other images from that day that I think are decent that I made with the square, I have a whole line of 35 that I think works because, as you know, I'm a total genius. Okay, people, let's get out of Southern California desert and let's get to Coney Island, New York. Now, I've got a friend who's in the photo industry. She's a big shot. She and I share a lot of common interests. Scotch, number one. Number two, we love the ponies. We love going to the track and watching the ponies. And number three, we love us some Coney Island. So this was during a photography event in the city where I hopped the train to Coney. She met me out there, and I was like, all right, I'm going to take a couple of hours and I'm going to do a sort of mini project on Coney. That's the images you're about to look at, and this is the first image, which is a fisherman who's walked out onto the jetty, which is sort of tide coming in or coming out. I don't remember, can't tell, but he's kind of stranded out there fishing. It's a feeling, this is winter. It's late September, early October, so it's cold. It's getting colder. Actually, a nice storm hit later this week. That's a whole nother separate story. It's kind of funny. But this is what I'm trying to convey here is a sense of cold and sense of isolation mixed in a deserted Coney Island. Okay, I told you that this was a body of work that did not work for me, doesn't work for me, and I'm kind of embarrassed that in the midst of Coney Island, I decided that I needed a picture of the cyclone. Yes, it's the roller coaster that everybody knows about. This is an institution. It's been there forever. It's been there since 1825, and it was built by General Custer. It's a fact that not many people know. I don't need a picture of the cyclone. But in my brain, in my weakened state, I was like, oh, I'm in Coney Island. I better shoot the cyclone because I'm a clown. And this is like nails on a chalkboard for me. Now, yes, I got lucky, little detail in the sky. It's not the worst photo in the world, but again, why am I doing this? The cyclone has been photographed probably tens of millions of times, and I certainly do not need to add to the mix. Wow, this is like a fever dream. Some would call it a nightmare. Yeah, this is another photo that I made and actually edited and scanned and presented, and I have no idea why. So yeah, there's little footprints on the sand, and there's rivulets, and there's like little trenches made from the wind, and there's the human element with the legs in the background. Is there a redeeming feature of this photograph? No, not really. It's not working for me. The only thing I like about this, and this is something I like about all these images, is the way they were scanned to show an almost full rebate around the edges of the film. And if you don't know what the full rebate is, that is the edges of the film that show the kind of film where you see the writing. In this case, it could be Tri-X or T-Max. I don't think it was T-Max. I think it was Tri-X. I like the full rebate. I like the scans. I like the curved edges of the Hasselblad frame on the full frame scan. That's the only redeeming feature of this. Wow, it just keeps coming. So this is a picture that I didn't like when I shot it, and I knew I didn't like it when I shot it, and I like it even less today because this is representative of an entire genre of photography that I see all the time now. I would throw this into the urban abstract landscape, the dreaded urban abstract landscape, void of people, architecture shot. Again, I have seen tens of thousands of these. This is not a good photograph. This doesn't work for me. 99.9% of the urban abstract landscapes I see are derivative of work that came from the 1970s. It was okay back then because there was some sort of pseudo novelty to it. It doesn't work anymore, and it's people do it because there's no human engagement, there's no human interaction. You can do this stuff quickly. And yeah, I detest this photo, and I know that's a strong word, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with it. Okay, slightly redeeming photograph, but embarrassing none the same because this screams amateur. For whatever reason in my mind, this is like first workshop you ever taken. This is like college photo student. This maybe is high school photo student. This is like, okay, this entire picture is based on basically shallow depth of field with the 6.6 on the fence, and then the geographic shape of the Ferris wheel, which everyone knows, so it's immediately identifiable. It's an easy read. This is the kind of picture you make and you go, wow, I'm making progress. This is really great. When in actuality, the devil on your shoulder says, by the way, I'm going to just step aside because you are the devil. You don't need my little representation on your shoulder because you are a walking cliche. Okay, now I am starting to double up on some of the mistakes I've already made. Remember the picture, the second one I showed of the little trenches in the sand with the seagull footprints and the human legs in the background? I'm doing the same thing because I've already, my one-trick pony with my Hasselblad, I'm already repeating myself because that's all I can do at this point. I don't really have a solid core of a story, and I am just kind of wandering around burning film at this point. This is another sort of feeble attempt at a decent photograph. Now, for example, if you were a meteorologist and you were talking about high wind in Coney Island and the fact that it had an impact on the erosion of the beach, maybe there's a use for this picture. But for me to convince myself that this is a solid photograph is pretty much, with a capital D, delusional. So I should have seen the irony in this, or the humor, or whatever else you can call it, but freak. That's kind of where I was at that point in my career, walking around Coney Island with a Hasselblad, thinking that I was a master photographer. By the way, when I worked for Kodak, I used to go to this event where people gave each other medals for mastering photography, and guys would walk around. It looked like Michael Phelps, except the guys were overweight and wearing like bad golf shirts. And they would walk around, give each other medals, and they'd be like, I am the master of lighting. I am the master of ceremonies. And it was really, there's no harm happening. But again, convincing myself that this is good photography, no. Here's the one thing, maybe the one positive takeaway so far as I walk you through these images, is photography's hard. And finding a voice is hard. And combine those two, and your degree of difficulty goes up exponentially. And it takes practice. So the vast majority of projects that I have done have ended somewhere around this Coney Island level of success. Most of what I've done isn't great. I think the vast majority of times I've hit the shutter button, not great. But then occasionally you either get lucky or a combination of hard work, skill, planning, and luck comes together and you make something good. So it's not that I wouldn't go out and do this again. I would try. But as you get older and you get more practiced and you get more seasoned, you hope to spend less time fumbling around with things like this and refine who you are. I said this on the monologue, on the opening monologue. Realizing that a picture was mine or not mine was a huge day for me. In a word, dumb. All right, I'm going to call off this bloodbath. This is the last one I'm going to show. There is a little glimmer of something in this picture because I am clearly trying to establish a foreground, midground, and background, and I've got my human element, and there is a sense of cold and isolation. So in some feeble way, this picture is successful. But is this a picture that I would put in front of anybody and say this is a good photograph? No, I would simply not do that. So that's kind of the gist of this film, was to show you a body of work that's unsuccessful in my mind, even though, like I mentioned, it was commercially successful. But let's have a little wrap-up chat, shall we? Here we are on the plains of the Serengeti, and we're here watching the digestion of a gazelle that my assistant ate. He got very hungry. No, the moral of the story really is not about necessarily a body of work that didn't work, because clearly this one didn't work, at least for me. The key, now that I think about it, that I've sort of taken this roundabout route to get to, is me having done this long enough to understand the kind of photograph I was making was not mine. It's not my photo. Do you understand? Do you fathom how important that is? Because at some point, typically, not for everyone, but for a lot of people, at some point you get to the moment in your career where you say to yourself, I have done this too long to be making a bunch of pictures for other people that aren't my pictures. Some photographers are able to completely push aside any personal gain, any personal idea they have, and they're happy working and producing work for other people, regardless of what it is. I know because I've assisted for a couple of these folks. It's astounding for me to watch. I don't have that in me. I quit photography in '97 the first time because my portfolio at the end of 1997, even though it was all published like editorial work, it wasn't mine. I looked at it and people were like, wow, this is a solid portfolio, buddy. You're doing okay. And I was like, this sucks, right? You suck, I suck, this work sucks. Why am I doing this? I quit. I should have never come back to photography as a professional. I should have just stayed an amateur. But no, my ego, my insecurity, all the crap that we bring to the table as photographers took over. I went back, spent another decade shooting pictures for other people, quit for realsy in 2010, and I've not looked back. So that potentially is the moral of the story. The secondary moral, let's go to the drop-down menu, File, Secondary, down at the bottom. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to shoot things that don't work. It's okay to film a film in the middle of 12 noon light at 7,000 feet in the desert, where your camera is melting and all the lens glue is probably melting off onto the diaphragms inside. That's okay. 99% of what we do with the camera isn't really gonna work. It's gonna suck, regardless of what the silent masses online are telling you that you're a genius. They're probably not right about that, but don't sweat it. Just have fun and keep plugging.